Um, Clean my phone screen really quick. Chip it, chip it, chip, 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 chip. Okay, that's better. Uh, Let me fix my chat filter. Boom. It's late, so as I always state when it's late, I'm not gonna stay on for long unless the conversation gets really good. Then I might finagle it a little bit longer than I normally would. But if not, it's all good. But today is Ask Me Anything Friday. And you guys know I like doing these occasionally so I can interact with new people. Um, no one's here yet in the chat room. I know I'm just talking to myself, but people watching this on replay probably appreciate there not being a bunch of dead air. I've seen with some live streamers um, on the lower tier of YouTube will just have dead air and no one wants to watch that. That's or they don't even show themselves. It's like you got to put something in there that's going to titillate people. Um, I don't understand why some of the lower tier live streamers don't understand that. Like they will literally have nothing going on in the stream. You always want to have something to catch the eye in the stream, whether it's you yourself, some audio playing, something, but just to have like dead air and it's just like, I mean, you realize you're competing against tons of stuff that people could watch at the moment. Like they can literally just go to Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or Amazon Prime, Paramount Plus, MGM Plus, Tubi, um, Crunchyroll, and I can just keep naming streaming services that they could watch instead of watching instead of just watching you live stream. Or even here on YouTube, they are literally a million plus content creators. So you definitely want to do something. So hello to everyone in the chat room. I'm Just A Contrarian. This is my Ask Me Anything Fridays, where you can ask me literally anything as long as it is family friendly. I always say it has to be family friendly because some people will ask some really outrageous things, and I'm like, let's within it's like let's keep it reasonable, okay? But yes, anything within reason, ask me. I don't pretend to be an expert on all things. However, having some training in analytic philosophy, I don't mind, conversing about mostly any topic. So, if anybody wants to bring up something, or if you want to bring up something from my previous live streams, like yesterday, I just did a live stream wherein I defended the Passport Bro movement because it's caught a lot of flack online in the past year. And I myself have clowned on them recently myself. I actually prevented, I actually stopped myself from posting a YouTube short about a week or so ago where I was leaning on them just because it was getting tiring um, talking about them. From now on, if I'm going to talk about someone, I'm not going to talk about the whole movement unless I find the whole movement problematic, which I don't with them, as I'm part of the movement myself. But you can say I'm part of the problem. Okay, that's a fair argument to make if you want to make that argument. But otherwise, I'm not going to just lump a bunch of people into one thing and say you're all the problem. I'm going to speak on individuals who are the problem. And if I can, like I'll avoid individually like specifying who that person is. I can just talk about them in a generic sense. Okay, because I don't want to personally attack other content creators anymore if I can avoid it, because it can become nasty. Thank you, Moonlit. I was actually going to ask again if someone could uh, uh, put that up. Um, but I was gonna say, could you do it without the at? Because it might confuse people with the at symbol. Because the at symbol is actually used by um what do they call? What's up, Carlton? Uh, what's the other app? The one I don't use anymore because I don't get any um transactions on it. Mo- God, I can't even remember. But yeah, from now on, can you do it without the at symbol, please? Because that'll make it less confusing. Because if people see the at symbol and the dollar symbol, they might put type in both, and it might confuse them. But yeah, that is my Cash App handle, guys. Dollar sign Just A Contrarian. If you guys want to donate to the channel, you can hit super chat as well on here, but not everyone wants to do super chat, so you can also do thank you. Um, so you can also do the Cash App if you're not comfortable doing super chat. So you can do super chat or Cash App. Also, I have a link in my description for Buy Me a Coffee, and that's simply buymeacoffee.com, all one word. I don't put it in here just because I think it's easier to get it directly through Cash App or through Super Chat. But you can go to the link in the description and hit me up with a Buy Me a Coffee. Also, the great thing about the Buy Me a Coffee is we can converse on the Buy Me a Coffee app. It's an app and a website. So you can either use the website if you're using a desktop or laptop, or you can use the app over your phone or tablet. And on there, you can converse with me um, through private messages on Buy Me a Coffee, and or you can sign up for memberships on Buy Me a Coffee too. I used to have a follower here from Britain who used to send me Buy Me a Coffee donations, and she used to talk to me sometimes on there as well. I don't know what happened with her. I know that I think she's like hospitalized because she has a channel on here, but it looks as if all her content is filmed from inside her house, or that's just the way she likes to make content. I'm not sure, but in any case, um, rest assured that aside from my live streams, you will see me outside. I frequently do some pre-recorded videos where I'm riding along with a friend discussing different topics, or I might share topics. Oh, excuse me, or I might share content of me traveling or my wife traveling, um, or of me training. So more of that is on the way. I just haven't had the time to do so. I am awaiting my wife to edit her content so I can put that on here as well. But she's always busy, so it's like I don't know when she'll ever get to it, and I keep reminding her. So hopefully she'll see this and be like, okay, I'll do it. But like I'm still waiting for like her stuff from her Indochina trip. I'm still waiting for that. Still waiting from some stuff she did recently in the Philippines and some stuff she did last year in the Philippines actually. So still waiting on both of those. And I had a video showing my everyday carry items that I keep on me when I go out. Originally, it was originally being edited by a friend of the channel. I think she still stops by the channel, but she's no longer actively involved with it. But shout out to her. Um, and she just didn't have the time to do it, and I, I was I was literally supposed to post it like 5 months ago. To be honest, this was a video like from 5 months ago that I wanted to post. That's how long ago it freaking was. It's crazy. Um, so now I'm going to edit it myself with the help of my wife, who knows more about video editing than I do. But I do have a video on the way with me doing, just showing my little everyday carry stuff. And I might actually delete it and remake another one because I actually have a different, um, not well. I've added and deleted some stuff to what I do on my everyday carry, or EDC, which is basically like, like tactical things that you keep on your person when you go out every day, like to work, to the to the bar or wherever. So that video will be on its way. However, I might just reshoot the whole thing. I mean, it was only like 8 minutes long, which is, like I said, it was so surprising that it was taking like 3-4 months to edit, because I'm like, it's just an 8 minute video. But c'est la vie. Uh, any case, back to the topic at hand, which is just ask me anything. So ask me some questions. Like I said, if you want to ask me something about yesterday's live stream on the Passport Bro movement or Black fatigue, I might just do a separate video or a live stream on the concept of Black fatigue, because it is pertinent, and I think it is the missing ingredient in why a lot of guys are Passport Bros, the actual Passport Bros, not the ones you've seen on TV. A lot of people being called Passport Bros that you've seen in the media are not Passport Bros. They're not even black. And I'm sorry. The Passport Bro the Passport Bro movement started within a circle of black men traveling within the black manosphere that started up with them. So, we invited everyone to be a part of it. Um, but I've seen people try to whitewash the history of the Passport Bro movement. Russell, what's up? He said, "What's your view on the Illuminati? You think it's real?" So I actually did a whole live stream on that. So several months ago, if you want to check them out, I'm still going to answer your question though, by the way. But several months ago, I did 2 weeks where I just addressed different topics dealing with the paranormal, the occult, and other extra scientific phenomena. And one of the things I addressed was, the Illuminati and other secret societies. And here's the thing, I re- it kind of boggles my mind that people still talk about the Illuminati in the 21st century. Um, was it real? Yes. Is it still real? No. The Illuminati was a secret society, that ended in around like the it ended in the early like 19th century. It has not been around since then. And even when it was around, it wasn't doing anything like nefarious that people think of. They weren't like they weren't like the secret rulers of the world pulling all the strings, making things happen like wars and poverty and genocides. And that's not what the Illuminati was. It was a secret society, uh, based in Europe. It fizzled out in the 19th century. I don't really understand what has kept this myth of it still being around going, other than I think people are just fascinated by by it being a just by the nature of it being a secret society. I think people have some misgivings about it. But I mean, it's sort of the same thing. Even on a lower level, people still have a lot of misgivings about Greek fraternities and sororities. Like, people think they do all sorts of weird stuff. Or on the Freemasons, which I also addressed in the Secret Society live stream that I did, like fraternities, Freemasonry, Illuminati, the Shriners, the Bilderberg group, whom and I stated in a live stream, I think the Bilderberg group is the most insidious of all of them, because they are actually, they exist. They hold annual meetings every year to which the media is not invited, and only the most powerful people are given invitations. and they kind of set, because these are very powerful people. These are government leaders, powerful, powerful corporate executives of multinational companies, um, and uh, other influential figures. And they come out of there. They have, to be sure, they have an agenda, that, which is the purpose of these annual meetings. And because they are private, um, and they are not open to the media, it kind of begs it it it, it it's questionable what happens there, or what their agenda they are setting. For instance, when President Obama first got elected in 2008, he was invited to that Bilderberg group. I found that rather interesting. Not to mention, like, not too soon afterwards, when he came into office, most of the people in his cabinet were stacked from Wall Street. Garland says, according to Black folks, Jay-Z is the Illuminati leader. That's funny. So when I used to watch Math Hoffa, I stopped watching him after he supported Big Joe's bullshit, and I realized, oh, Math Hoffa is just a tether. But before then, when I was watching his um his channel, uh, he he used to often invite um celebrities in the hip hop world to his, not just the hip hop world, but usually like black celebrities, either in the hip hop world or in Hollywood, to his, to his channel. And he used to often ask them about the Illuminati. And it was just funny because, like, yes, within the black community, there is this ongoing belief that there's an Illuminati. I think what it is often the case that people who come from a lower, not necessarily lower income, but people who have less power, people who have less social prestige in society, tend to embrace conspiratorial ideas, because it gives them a sense of control over something they otherwise have no control over. So people will embrace ideas about Illuminati and Freemasons and aliens, aliens secretly controlling aspects of our world, and all sorts of crazy stuff. Because, like I said, for a lot of lesser educated people and people who are of lesser socioeconomic status, it kind of gives them a sense of control, having these holding these esoteric beliefs, because it gives them, it makes them feel like they know something that even the people higher up don't know. I know something that you don't. I know that Roswell is really blah 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 blah. So that's the sort of thing that you see often with people who are um, inclined to such like conspiracy type ideas, or fantasy prone personalities. But yeah, this Jay-Z is the Illuminati leader. It's just absurd. I mean, if we're gonna say any black leader was the Illuminati leader, it would be like, um, it would be someone less obvious. Like, it wouldn't be like a rapper, especially not a. I mean, please, it would be someone influential in the background, like Bob Johnson, who used to own BET, right? Or someone, or Oprah, or Obama for some people, or something like that. Like, if there was going to be some sort of Illuminati leader, you would think it would be a very influential person. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while. What's up? Our little chocolate drop is back. But yeah, Jay-Z is definitely not that smart. People overrate. He's not dumb either. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, if you remember how they used to talk about what um remember the little stupid thing that went viral like many years ago when people were asking, would you take a would you go to dinner with Jay-Z or would you take $100,000 or something like that? And I'm like, how is that even a serious fucking question? Like, you think just going to a dinner with Jay-Z is gonna lead to you becoming like a super unless you are already a talented individual and you need to meet up with him so that you can have him put you on to become a celebrity. I get that, but for the average person, that doesn't make sense. You should definitely take the money. Like that used to be the dumbest shit. Yeah, 500,000 a dinner with Jay Z. That used to be so fucking dumb, man. Excuse my language, but yeah, it's like, why is that even a question? I would take 500,000 over seeing anyone. I mean, I don't care if you I don't care if you're Jesus. I'm taking 500,000. You can be Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Quetzalcoatl, Thor, Odin, Zeus, Mithra, um, Confucius, Lao Shi, um, Shangxue, the Great Spirit, um, um, Bruce Lee, uh, the Care Bears, the Last Unicorn, um, My, Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, and Leonardo, and Splinter. I You could be all of those people rolled up into one. I'm taking the 500,000 over seeing that person or persons. He said then there was a $1 trillion dinner with. Really? Sorry, I say really like that. My friend used to say I used to every time I used to say really, I would sound like Eat the Cat. If I don't know if you guys ever remember that cartoon, Eat the Cat. I used to love that cartoon, by the way. But remember, Eat the Cat had this fat. He was a cat, right? And he had this fat cat girlfriend, and he for some reason he was just so proud of his girlfriend, and he kept a picture of her and would always show her to people. And he was like, "Yeah, this is my girlfriend. What do you think of her?" And everyone would squint their eyes looking at the picture, like they would look at him. They look down like, "Yeah, she's kind of fat." And then he would look back at the picture like, "Really?" It's just used to. Uh, I was like 14 or 15 when that came out. I swear I used to die laughing on that shit. Man, that shit used to make me laugh because he like, how you did not see like she wasn't like a slightly fat like feline cat. Like she was like Lizzo, like she was like a Lizzo size cat, and he would be like, "Really?" She used to crack me up. But yeah, apparently every time I say "really," people say I sound like Eek the cat, so I don't mean to do that. Oh, Santa Claus. Yeah, well, damn, I forgot about Santa. I mean, because Santa could drop you some. Santa, unlike all the other people, can actually do something for you, like tangible. But no, ain't no way in hell I'm taking 500,000 over any gift or gifts the Santa could drop me. Um, I think it's the kid in me that wants to say I'll take Santa, but no, I'm still taking the 500,000 and a trillion between. I mean, speaking, I mean, I'm already an atheist, so that's not even a question for me. But even if you were religious, you would have to be out of your mother freaking mind to choose Jesus over $1 trillion. I, like I said, nah. And I mean, and besides that, if you are a believing Christian, you're gonna see him again anyway, because according to Christian faith, depending on how you interpret it, um, everyone when they everyone when they die, they're not going immediate to heaven. They have to wait until the Jesus return to earth, when he comes to collect all the saved souls. So all of you who believe are already going to meet him anyway. So you may as well just take the $1 trillion. So I can't even believe that that's a real that anyone. I can't even believe that was a real debate. Especially like I said, and it's sad that the atheist has to bring that up too, because again, the this is why a lot of us are atheists, by the way, because we tend to know the religious faith better than the people who avow it. But yeah, I mean, a person of Christian faith, you should take the $1 trillion over Jesus, not because you're picking money over Jesus, but uh, Jesus is our heavenly King and Father, but we have our earthly King and Father, whether you see it as the president or your boss or whatever. You know, give to Caesar what is owed to Caesar, right? So you are going to meet up with Jesus anyway if you are saved, because upon your death you will be just dead com- um until Jesus is coming, where he takes all the saved souls and takes them to heaven with him. Everyone else who are not saved will sit here and face the wrath of the of the Antichrist and all the hell wrought on earth. So I guess people forgot those. So whoever said $1 trillion of Jesus obviously forgot his religious teachings. Sorry for that rant. Carlton says, "I'll take dinner with a genie over 500,000. I can wish for money." Oh yeah, I mean that's no question. And it depends on what type of genie. Now, some genies won't allow you to ask for unending wishes, but obviously, if I can ask for unending wishes, that's going to be the wish I ask for. My first wish will be unending wishes. Um, and then, but if but somewhere in those wishes, I would ask for like to be a multi-trillionaire. But you gotta make sure it's not one of those tricky genies either, Carlton, because some of those tricky genies, like they offer you, like the monkey's paw sort of thing. Like every wish you get is kind of laced with a sort of punishment or curse attached to it. So depending on how you phrase the wish, it can come with unintended consequences to 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 basically um punish you for your avarice. So you gotta make sure it's not one of those genies. Like if you're dealing with one of those sneaky genies, pause. But if you're dealing with a sneaky genie, you gotta be very modest in your wishes. But even still, yes, a genie over 500,000 all day long, because you can still ask for like $1 million. In today's in today's world, that's not even obscene. Like there's literally over 1 million millionaires in the U.S. currently. Like there's like over 1.5 million millionaires in the U.S. We used to have the most millionaires in the world. Now I think China does. I think they even have the most billionaires in the world. And most of them are in Beijing, whereas most America used to have the highest number of billionaires, and most of them were, I think, in New York City. Just a random factoid. Causes you wish for $1 trillion, but you can't access it. Yeah, you got like I said, you gotta be careful with these genies. Like, or you might ask for like um to have unending good health, and as a result everyone dies around you or something crazy like that. Like you gotta be careful if it's a genie that offers a monkey paw type wishes, or if they give you genuine wishes, like the genie from Disney's Aladdin. Like he's a good genie. Like he offers By the way, genies are actually part of Muslim faith. Like I was about to say, we Muslims, like I'm a Muslim as a kid, I was, but yes, Muslims believe in genies. Like genie was just sort of a generic name for a spirit. They weren't necessarily. It became known in in American folklore for people who for spirits who grant wishes, but according to the Muslim faith, this actually comes out of Arabic culture because this predated Islam, obviously, the belief in genies. But genie was basically like a generic name for like spirits. So they didn't all necessarily wishes. That was just in the novel, the one uh, 1001 uh, Arabic Nights. But I need to add that to my reading list. By the way, I think I did, but if I didn't, I need to add that to my reading list. A thousand. I like reading classic literature, so I'm gonna add that to my reading list. 1001 Arabian Nights. Uh, but what was I gonna say? But yeah, just like in Japan, they have spirits, and sometimes they've been associated with either playing doing cruel things to people or doing nice things for people. Um, I think they call them kamis or shimakami, um, within like the Shinto religion in Japan. But yeah, if I'll take a genie over $500,000 easily because I can leverage my wishes with a genie over 500,000. But if it's a tricky genie, I'm taking the 500,000. um, but yeah, getting back to what Russell said. So if Russell's still here, brother, like I said, I addressed the Illuminati in my previous live stream, but I hope I answered your question earlier, which is that the Illuminati was a real organization back in Europe during um, the industrial during the pre-industrial age, but died out around the 19th century, and they have not come back yet. Like I said, I think the modern version of the Illuminati today is the Bilderberg Group that holds annual meetings every year and is completely closed off to the media. Sometimes we know people who are invited to those annual meetings, but they're not able to divulge anything that's happened there or who else is there or the purposes of the meeting. We just don't know. And I find that troubling that um, you know, the leaders of multinational companies and of nations are get to go to a secret meeting like that in this day and age, and we're completely not privy to anything about it. That is creepy. So if I'm surprised that more people aren't worked up about the Bilderberg group. Instead, people worry about Freemasons. They worry about Illuminati. They worry about fraternities. They worry about um, the influential families like the what's um the like the like the Rockefeller family or the or what's that Jewish family that people always think is doing evil stuff. And they aren't doing anything. They're just a powerful rich Jewish family. The Rothschilds, like they're not doing anything. Like, I don't understand why people are so worked up about them. Other than aside from anti-Semitism, obviously, I don't see why people are worked up about the Rothschilds nor the Rockefellers, um, or the Shriners. If people know the Shriners, they're a powerful family. Arnold Schwarzenegger's ex-wife, she was both a Kennedy and a Shriner, which was like he was pulling power moves by marrying her because he married into two powerful families, the Kennedys and the Shriners, which is why just being a foreigner and a and an actor, he was able to leverage that and become the governor of California. And people don't remember how influential that he was at the time. People were literally talking about amending the Constitution so he could run for presidential office back in the early 2000s. So he had a lot of sway uh, with those powerful families backing him that he became governor. And on top of that, he ran as a Republican. The Kennedys are Democrats. I'm not sure what the Shriners are. I'm pretty sure the Shriners are Democrats as well. Someone can fact check me on that. But the Kennedys are unequivocally a, a Democrat family, and they still backed him as a Republican candidate to the state of California. That's incredible, especially when you look at today. You flat fast forward 25 years later, and their their nephew, the son of Robert F. Kennedy Sr., they wouldn't even back him when he originally wanted to be a Democratic candidate for the Democratic Party. People forget that, like, his own family wouldn't back him, so he went. Well, I mean, well, I won't say that. So some of them backed him, but a lot of them didn't want to go against the Democratic National Party, the Democratic National Committee. Sorry. And so he became an independent. Um, and then when he threw in his when he threw in with Donald Trump, a, a lot of his family completely turned their backs on him. But they backed a Republican for the state of California with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's incredible. But anyway, so like I said, if anyone was to be worked up about any secret society or secret organization, I would be worried about the Bilderberg meetings more than the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Freemasons, or the Illuminati, who no longer exist. There's some other secret societies out there that have went defunct as well, but I can't remember them right now. If someone can recall them, they can bring them up here. But I don't remember the names of those other groups offhand because I haven't thought about those in so long, and I haven't read any of my Skeptical Inquirer magazines in a while to like refresh my memory on those things. Um, but yeah, any any other questions? But yeah, the whole the whole Jay Z or $500,000 dinner with Jay Z or $500,000 was the stupidest thing in the world. Besides, and not to nitpick, but with this dinner with Jay Z, who's actually responsible for paying for it? I'm assuming Jay Z is paying for the dinner as well in this hypothetical scenario. Like I said, that whole it's just what something like that to me is just a simple intuition pump. An intuition pump is sort of like a lazy man's thought experiment that doesn't really lead to any thought provoking ideas. That's what they call it. That's what it's called, an intuition pump. That was something that the late Daniel Dennett coined, um, and he used it for thought experiments, but not in a derisive sense. Although it came to be used in a derisive sense for like thought experiments that weren't very clever or led to anything insight. It intuition pump became derisively known as sort of a thought experiment, or what we call in philosophy a Gedanken experiment. Gedanken is just German for thought or proposition. So it was sort of a Gedanken experiment that wasn't very insightful. That was what we call intuition pump. And to me, these sort of scenarios did go viral are just like these sorts of intuition pumps. The newest one, obviously, is 100 men versus a gorilla. Who would win? That lasted for a nice little 2 weeks. Carlos says, I bet the Jay-Z dinner thing was probably created by the same dude who stayed who started the man versus gorilla debate. The person who started the man versus the 100 men versus gorilla started on X on Twitter several weeks ago. So, which is funny because people keep saying, "Oh, well, Twitter's dead now." No, it's still thriving. It's just that a lot of left-leaning people who are upset about Elon and Trump left and went to Blue Sky. So Blue Sky. So now it's like all of like most of Twitter. Some of Twitter still has some left-leaning celebrities still on there. Some of them left and then they came back. Like Mark Hamill notoriously left Twitter after being upset and went to Blue Sky, and then he came back a few months ago. And then there was a few other people who just didn't say anything on Twitter for a long time. And then they started being active again, but it wasn't the same person because the Jay-Z thing started like that had been like what 10 years ago when that first came out. And the funny thing is, Jay-Z even responded to it himself. He was like, he was telling people, he's like, if I were you, I would definitely take the money. Like if Jay-Z himself is telling people, hey, if I were you, I would take the money. I will listen to him. Besides, what people have this people have this mis this muddled thinking and thinking that just because someone is successful that they are somehow a very insightful or intellectually capable person. There's a lot of brilliant excuse me. There are a lot of successful morons out there. Because success is mostly a matter of luck and family resources, not about intellect and talent. I hate to burst people's bubble, but the path to success is largely determined by chance, random chance, and having family resources. There are a lot of brilliant poor people, and I'm not necessarily talking about myself, but there are a lot of brilliant poor people. Not to mention, there are people who are intellectually gifted whose lives are complete shit because they didn't have the resources to refine their to refine their um their genius. You know, you can have someone who's of gifted intelligence, and because of the lack of resources or just bad luck, they can end up a custodian. Not saying I'm not shitting on custodians. Nothing wrong with being a custodian. However, if you're someone with like 140 IQ and excelled through school, you can still end up impoverished. Just saying, like high IQ and talent are not necessarily guaranteed to get you to where you want to be in life. But if you listen to all these self-help gurus, they make it sound as if everyone who's behind in life are just lazy, that they lack certain tools and talents. Or the Ghostbuster Winston Zeddemore said, we had the tools, we had the talent. He also had the resources, but no, and he had a good chance. But anyway, no. So, um, it, like there are some horror stories out there of gifted people who have ended up in prison and working dead end jobs. Because here's the thing about that, and I know I'm going on a tangent, but I think it's useful information. People Public education fails a lot of gifted students because usually special education is just um, most of the resources for special education go to people of lower intellect, which is fine. But I think that's a waste of resources of special education because let's be honest, some of those people can only go so far anyway because of their limited intellect. Just by definition, like if someone is um, of clinical of clinical retardation, and I'm not meaning that as an insult. I mean we still use the term retardation in the clinical sense. Just because every time there's a different term for it, it becomes it, any term that's used to replace mental retardation often becomes a pejorative term itself. Just because most people in society see lower intellect as something to rightfully not want to have to possess. So anytime we try to use a politically correct term for mental retardation, it itself also always becomes an insult. So what you can say, so people will say sped now, or cognitively challenged, intellectually disabled. These all become ways to insult people, even though they're meant to be politically correct. So you may as well just use the original term. By the way, terms like dumb and deaf used to be clinical terms back in the day in like early psychology. Just like we would say mute. Like mute, I don't think mute is really insult, but sometimes we don't use mute. We just but people don't say deaf anymore. Usually they say hearing impaired. We don't say dumb. We say, But anyway, so someone who fits the clinical definition of mental retardation, you have different levels. You have borderline, which is usually people like at around IQ of like 85 or lower. That's like borderline retardation. um you have moderate, right? And then you have severe. Severe are the ones that people make fun of the most, but you rarely ever see because these people really can't be left to their own devices. Like these are the people when you talk about having to wear a helmet. I don't know if they still wear a helmet, but they tend to be in very protective, uh, some sort of protective dwelling where they're constantly monitored because they function at they function at the level of like a toddler, basically, um, which is sad. Um, but in any case, um, those putting all the resources of special education on them is going to give very modest results. And what people don't understand is people of gifted intelligence also need special education too, because just how normal classwork would be too much for the people of inferior ability of inferior intellectual ability. For the people of superior inferior ability, those classes will be too slow. And sometimes we find that some of these kids that are doing poorly in class, they're not doing poorly in class because because they're because they're because they're stupid, or because um they have ADHD. Some of these kids are intellectually gifted, and they're easily bored by they're easily bored by that by that education geared towards average students. This is why. And so what happens in a lot of schools that aren't built that, because again, a lot of public education doesn't put very much resources into special education for gifted students. So what normally happens is they just skip those kids up several grades up so they can so they can deal with coursework um, that will match their 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 academic capabilities. So you might see a kid who's 9 years old who is intellectually gifted bumped up from the fourth grade to like uh 10th grade or something like that, like Sheldon Cooper. That does really happen because, like I said, when you live in these moderate, and if you live in a moderate income neighborhood or a lower income neighborhood, there usually aren't very many resources for gifted students. All the special education is going towards the kids of who are of lower intellect, and so it's kind of a shame that special education has become synonymous with with lower intellect, because special education properly refers to both people of lower intellect and higher intellect. I remember my father wanted me to skip a year of high school. I'm like, no, why? I mean, maybe I should have. Then I could have started college at 16 instead of at 17. But if I had, what I would have done instead is maybe just take community college courses while I was in high school. That is probably what I would have done instead of skipping. Or, I mean, either or, but whatever. In any case, um, it's funny because later on he thought I was stupid, but that's a different subject. But yeah, in any case, getting back to the original point, um, my original point is even someone of gifted intellect, of gifted intelligence, can end up on the in the lower rungs of society because they didn't have the resources, um, so they could get, so they could develop, or they were just a victim of bad happenstance, of bad luck. Because like I said, the biggest factor in success that none of these health help gurus will admit, either out of ignorance that they don't actually know, or they do know and they just, but they're not going to say it because they can't. You can't sell luck. Is that, yeah, the biggest factor in most people's success, whether you're talking about celebrities, top level executives, or other sorts of powerful and affluential people, is luck. Is purely luck. That is the biggest factor in success. And because that's not sexy, because you can't bottle it, no one will tell you that. Well, most people won't. Behavioral researchers will tell you this. So behavioral and social researchers will tell you this, and so will probably philosophy professors and historians. These folks will tell you this, but it's not sexy for people who are trying to persuade you to do certain things to to admit that success is mostly a matter of luck. It's not advantageous for the politician trying to tell people that he can make their lives better for them, that their lives are only going to be better through a combination of luck and family resources, which most people lack. This is why most successful people, when you look into their background, they're not really people who made it from the mud. They're people. You look at people like Zuckerberg. You look at other folks. They all came from um, wealthy or upper middle class family backgrounds. One of the few people I can say actually made it out the mud was Jay-Z. To go back to our example about Jay-Z, he got it out the he got it out the mud. But even still, it's not like he didn't become a success within a social vacuum. His success has been incumbent on a lot of people in his life. So again, like no one pulls themselves up by the bootstraps and becomes a success. That's just not real. That's not just how it works in the real world. The whole concept of pulling yourself up by the bootstraps was actually, that original concept was actually meant to be sarcasm. By the way, most people, a lot of people who use that that concept, usually in the conservative world, not to shit on my fellow conservatives here, but a lot of people who believe in that whole pull yourself up by the bootstrap bullshit don't realize that that whole concept was started as as a parody, as a sort of mockery. It was never meant to be taken seriously. But so I think that is the ultimate. That's probably the ultimate joke, is that something that was meant to be a joke became taken seriously. So check my chat filter here. But yeah, is everyone still tracking with me? But yeah, please ask me some more questions. So I'll just keep droning on about the same thing. But yeah, if you've never heard that before, you've heard it here. Success is mostly a matter of luck and family resources. And there will be people you will, some of you might go back and talking with this amongst friends and family, especially friends and family who are very successful. And they're going to say, oh, that's just bullshit. That person saying that is just saying that because they're not successful. But when you hear stuff like that, that's when you got to call out fallacies when they are, and it's the fallacy of there is logical fallacy, informal logical fallacy of the fallacy of accomplishment, or the fallacy of success. I think I've mentioned it because I've done a bunch of videos where I actually mention a bunch of different logical fallacies. I think that was one of them that I mentioned. It's basically someone who takes their success, or someone's or the lack thereof of someone else's success, as to as to the veracity of their claims. And it's obviously the case that one's success or lack thereof has no has no connection to the veracity of someone's claims. The veracity of someone's claims are built upon the evidence to support them. Obviously, like if you don't have neither the logical structure or the empirical evidence to support a claim, it doesn't matter whether you're successful or not. And so I'll explain something like that to my father, who just lacks the capacity to understand certain things. He'll say, "Oh, that's just you're just a poor man's philosopher." Okay, guess what though? This poor man's philosopher didn't lose his uh, didn't lose his law practice. This poor man's philosopher hasn't been twice divorced. This poor man's philosopher didn't have a couple of illegitimate children. Um, this poor man's philosopher never ended up a junkie, and I can keep going. Not all those apply to him, but some of those do. uh, but yeah, you can call me a poor man's philosopher if you want, or say that I'm using poor man's logic. Poor man's logic is just another way of deriding uh, common sense wisdom. Um, Common sense wisdom is just being able to arrive at claims without having any sort of like um, heavy background knowledge in logic and philosophy and stuff like that. But I do have that background, so it's not really a poor man's philosophy because I paid a lot to get that knowledge. I'm still paying for it. But in any case, you can call it poor man's logic. It doesn't matter. It doesn't defeat, no matter what, no matter whether someone uses fallacies or they use shaming tactics like my father. It doesn't change the fact that it doesn't change the veracity of the claim. The veracity of a claim is either true or false. right? That's its truth value. Whether you're successful or not doesn't change that truth value just because you made it. It doesn't. And like I said, so a lot of people will, a lot of people will react negatively to being told that success is mostly a matter of success, but it is. If they don't like it, too bad. Pardon. But anyway, what can we move on? Can we get a new question or comment? Because I haven't seen anything, and I'm checking my filter because sometimes it'll go frozen on my end, and I'm like, oh, okay, no one said anything, and then several minutes later, it'll become unfrozen. I'm like, oh shoot, I missed a bunch of stuff. Oh, Trace says, what kind of work do you do? Um, do lead generation, and on the side, I teach martial arts and self defense, and do a little life coaching. Not to mention this, but this I don't really consider this work yet until like I'm actually like getting paid. Well, I have gotten paid from it, but like until it like actually gives me like a actual like sizable paycheck that I can buy more than just fruit snacks. But I mean, yeah, the most I've done with the checks I gotten from here was like buy like sneakers and fruit snacks and miscellaneous items of the sort. Whereas some people have made YouTube creation, content creation into their careers, which salute to them who have done so. I do have a goal in mind for this year to reach 10,000 subs. So if you guys can go ahead and sub to the channel if you haven't already, that would help me out a lot. Even if you don't watch, just having the subs would I would appreciate it. Although the sort of the metrics is starting to change for YouTube, whereas the algorithm is more rewarding people for more active engagement with their followers than subs. Previously, like years ago, it was more about having as much subs as possible. Now it's more about the engagement because YouTube is trying to compete with TikTok and all the other social media platforms are trying to compete with TikTok, which is right now the most successful platform. So you see Facebook doing the reels um, with IG. And it's funny, Facebook has to compete against Instagram, which is both part of Meta. So Facebook is competing uh, with its own Meta uh, um, social media. So it's compete. So Facebook is is competing with IG. So you see them starting being intertwined with each other. But it's also competing against TikTok and somewhat so Snapchat and Kick. Like when Snapchat became really successful back in the day because the Kardashians and other celebrities were using it, they tried to buy Snapchat, and Snapchat said no, and they went public. They gave an IPO just like Facebook did. What's up, just a dude? Um, and because because they refused to sell themselves to Meta, Facebook at the time, Facebook just kind of ripped off the technology for Snapchat and started doing the Snapchat like um, stuff within Facebook and IG. And now like they're all competing with TikTok, so they're trying to make this short content stuff more prevalent. So you'll see a lot of people becoming successful here on YouTube just making shorts. Like I've seen people making shorts who've never made long form content, and they have millions of subs. Like it's like I've never seen them posting long form content on YouTube, but they have millions of subs on here because they've become successful mastering the algorithm with doing the YouTube shorts. Just the dude says you've seen that weird dance off that happens at the border of India and Pakistan. No, but they are at war right now. That's not even a dance off. They are at a full scale war against each other. I have a friend currently in India who I I keep trying to ask her to come onto the platform. I gotta remind her again, see if she can do it. Oh, you mean they're literally dancing off? Actually, that would be a good thing because, like I said, you have two nuclear armed countries at war with each other. It's not a That's not a good situation right now, especially and for just to talk about in the national in the national interests of America. India forms a strategic partnership with us for the Indo-Pacific region as a as a as a as a stalwart to the hegemony of China right now. So we need India to be on point. However, we don't. We have certain we we have a we have a partnership with Pakistan as well. So it's not in America's interest that these two go to war with each other, even though they've been literally feuding since the partition of India 80 years ago. They've literally been feuding since the partition of India 80 years ago. And it's not really in America's interest to see them keep doing that because now that they're at a full scale war against each other, it can get nasty when both of them are nuclear armed. He said, "No, I know they are at war, but until recently, they did have this dance off." Yeah, I'm not familiar. Like I said, if they decided to goof off and just dance off with each other, that's fine. Like I said, there's a lot of volatility in that region of the world because again, India still has a skirmish with China on their eastern border as well that people aren't aware of. Um, and they've had like minor um, minor conflicts on that border where people have died. This has been going on for several years now, and now between the skirmish with China and Pakistan, this is not good. Especially as India is pivoting itself to be a powerful democratic country in that part of the world. When we need more allies like that because like really the only other like westernized democratic country we have around there is like Israel, um, Turkey somewhat, but Turkey now under the current strongman, I can't get his name right. Something Govanovan, something I can't remember his name, but um, he's taken the country backwards, whereas Turkey was sort of pivoting to more democratic leanings. Now they're going back to a more autocratic style of leadership and government. But again, they've been strategic partners to America too. Like anyone who's been in the military know that we will often come into Turkey was often a place where our military would um, come off in its on its way into parts of the Middle East. So Saudi Arabia is one of our strategic allies. Turkey, Kuwait. Shit, Kuwait is the reason why we went to war in the Persian Gulf back in 1991 in the first place, but that's a different story for another day. Um, uh, just that, yeah, India and Pakistan is a dangerous position, sort of a testing ground for Western versus Eastern fighter jets, etc. Is it, do you think China can be trusted if you're India? I'd be jumpy if I were them too. Um, I can't say who's at right or wrong between them because they're both contesting disputed land. And yes, the big red country has been known for bullying others, but India is not the country to be bullied. They are a larger country. Well, they geographically, I would say they are as about as large as China. By population, they're actually larger than China. There's 1.4 billion people in India now compared to 1.2 billion in China. I would say um, China has the better military currently. Like they're probably militarily, they're probably the second most powerful nation on the face of the earth besides us and Russia. Um, but saying all that, I can't say that China is in the wrong because it could very well be India as well. They are not. they are not. Um, they are not all popsicles and sunshine. I'll put it that way. Like I said, look at the shitty ways they've treated others. Um, like I said, when you look at the partition of India back in the 1940s, right? Was that no? Was it 1940s? Yeah, I think it was the 1940s, right? Or that was I can't remember. That was the 1920s and the 1940s. But with that, and then they further divided Pakistan because there was an East Pakistan and there was a West Pakistan, and because of the influence of India, then Pakistan divided again, and where you had East Pakistan, West Pakistan, you just had Pakistan, and then a separate nation which became, uh, I guess, I think Bangladesh or whatever. If, but then on top of how they've treated their neighbors in that region, so neither countries are innocent here. So the big it's not whether um, the big red country can be trusted, is whether these two can work through their misgivings so that you know. And the problem with international politics is that in domestic politics you expect to be grown ups, but in for some reason in international politics people can act like complete children, and it's considered and it's seen as okay. The type of childishness that goes into international politics is usually not um, tolerated in domestic politics unless you're in a unless you're in some little banana republic or third world type country in the first place. But in more westernized nations, and I mean, and specifically like Mexico, I mean, sorry, not Mexico, US, Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, the type of stuff that goes on in international politics wouldn't be tolerated at the on the national level for the most part. So I'm not going to say that one country is at fault here, especially once they've been feuding for so long that it's almost inevitable that there's been like problematic people on both sides causing stuff. Um, Trez Trey says, "Do you think it's in the best interest of the U.S. to be so involved in foreign affairs like Ukraine versus Russia and Israel versus Palestine?" As far as Ukraine versus Russia is complicated, that's going to be a yes and a no. The yes is because many decades ago, we we convinced Ukraine not not to take up nuclear arms in exchange for us giving them uh, militarily military support against at the time, which was the Soviet Union. So we asked them to basically um, not be nuclear armed in exchange for our military support against the approaching Soviet Union at the time. I mean, sorry, no, against the. Sorry, I'm mistaken here, as I was um, against Russia. This was after the Soviet Union dissolved, obviously. Sorry, sorry for misspeaking there. So, in exchange for Ukraine not taking up, because once the Soviet Union dissolved, a lot of its former Soviet states still retained a lot of the weaponry of the former Soviet Union and became basically like satellite states of Russia, even though the Soviet Union was no more. They acted as like de facto regions of Russia, places like Azerbaijan and Ukraine and a lot of countries with the last name Stan. um, However, there's also a no involved because Ukraine has been a highly corrupt and problematic country for decades. They were never fit for membership into NATO because of these problems. Yet we kept pushing them to align themselves with NATO. And one of the things that Russia pushed back against was they was like, we don't want NATO on our doorsteps, like, which is understandable. Like, imagine us in the United States, and we had uh, allies of Russia right around us with their weaponry pointed directly at us. That's what we were doing with NATO, and it was like, yeah, we're not going to tolerate that with Ukraine. And we kept pushing them to try to um, we kept pushing for their alliance towards NATO anyway. Um, and the back and forth between Ukraine and Russia has gone on, like I said, before this this has happened. This has been going on since like World War I. We can even take it even farther back if we wanted to, like literally the Middle Ages. Just but if we're going to just stick with modern history, like the problems between Russia and Ukraine stem back to like the era, like the early European wars of the early 20th century, World War I, World War II, and so forth. This probably was not something we should have got involved in. We did because we saw it as a way, the, but we got involved because we have a bunch of neoliberal, neocon folks running the government, at least at the time when this kicked off, and they saw a proxy war with Russia through supporting Ukraine as a way of weakening Russian sovereignty. I don't think that was a good long term plan, personally. Again, I don't have the pay. I'm not. I don't have the pay grade to suss that out. But the idea that we could wage a proxy war with Russia through Ukraine to weaken Russia's influence and sovereignty, to me, didn't sound like a good long term game plan at the cost of hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars and lots of life lost. So, like I said, so that's why that's a yes and no question with Ukraine. Like I said, on one hand, there was sort of a treaty we had with Ukraine to back them up militarily in exchange for them not taking up nuclear arms, after the fall of the Soviet Union. However, Ukraine Ukraine has largely been a failed state since then, and in somewhat of a Machiavellian sort of way. I don't think it was to our advantage to keep to that treaty with them when they were mostly a failed state and full of corrupt leaders whom it didn't really make sense to support, if that makes sense. As far as Israel and Palestine, that's more clear cut. It's definitely within the non-national security interest to support Israel. Israel is a political and strategic ally in that part of the that part of the world in the Middle East. It is our strongest ally. They give us serious intel. Um, so yeah, as cold as it is, yes, I'm not going to even lie and say that Israel hasn't committed some atrocities, but I still, but but yes, it's definitely in America's national interest to support Israel versus Palestine. And I'm not going to even say versus Palestine because there is no Palestine. You have a bunch of Palestinian tribes that still say free Palestine, and people don't want to admit this, especially on the left. Most of the people who say free Palestine in America on the left, um, they don't even know Middle Eastern history. There has literally not been a sovereign Palestine since antiquity. There has not. If if you want to be generous, you can say since the Middle Ages, but there really hasn't been a sovereign state of Palestine since antiquity. But I'll be nice and say since the Middle Ages. There's been Palestinian tribes that have been a part of different states and kingdoms in that region, whether you're talking about the Persian Empire, um, the Ottoman Turks, um, the um, these Arabic caliphates, the British, Egyptians, um, and so on. Like there, there has not been a sovereign state of Palestine since antiquity. Um, the people have, continued there, just like the Jewish people had continued in that part of the world without having their own nation. Probably the problem was when Israel was established in 1947. They probably should established a Palestine as well. I think that was a huge flaw because I think that was originally within the mix. If I'll have to go back and read up on that, but I'm pretty sure there was talks originally to set up a both a state of Israel and a state of Palestine back then. But a lot of Palestinians felt they were robbed of a country when the state of Israel was adopted, and every country in that region of the world went to war against Israel when it was established. Um, and I always hear people say, I'm anti Zionist, but I'm not anti Semitic. And I'm sorry, that doesn't fly with me. Being anti Zionist is anti Semitic because being anti Zionist means that you don't believe that Israel should have that the Jewish people should have their own nation state. You can disagree with a lot of Israel's politics and their warmongering in that region without also subscribing to the idea that they shouldn't have their own nation state. Um, so that is anti-Semitic in my mind, because saying these people can't have their own state in a region of the world where there's only one Jewish state in the entire world. There are over 50 Muslim countries in the world. So yeah, I'm gonna say that's anti-Semitic. But again, as far as American interests are involved, yes, it is definitely within our national interests to support Israel over um, over some of these folks in that part of the world because they are a strong ally and friend of America. They supply us with a lot of intel and support in that region of the world. And just and then of course, as far as history is concerned, it's just the right thing to do anyway. But America doesn't often do things that are the right thing to do unless it's within our with obviously unless it's within our national interest. And supporting them is within our national interest unequivocally. So even if it does mean turning a blind eye to some horrendous things, unfortunately. But being an ally of a country doing wrong does give us sway to say to 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 influence them to stop doing some of these things, which we have been able to do behind the scenes. But again, I'm not trying to go above my pay grade here. Uh, Just a dude says, I wish we would leave the Ukraine situation alone. Israel too. Israel's strong as hell. They don't need our help to fight their neighbors. Well, they're strong because we support them, as does the European Union. He said, I'm just a civilian, so maybe my opinion means nothing, but I don't see anything worth getting involved in Ukraine or Gaza. Huh. He said, I mean, maybe if Israel were being invaded by one of the others world powers, we should help, but they are very good at fighting terrorists. They're only very good at it because of our support. You don't understand that from the time that they were established, literally, they went to war with every country in that region of the world just because they were formed. And it wasn't once, it wasn't twice, it wasn't thrice. It was indeed 4 wars against Israel. Um, there was 4 Israeli-Arab wars, 4, and then after that there was 3 infantadas, which was like insurrections within the country from you know from Arab Israelis and Palestine from Palestinian and Arab Israelis to overthrow the Israel from within. So they have been fighting terror literally since they were formed. That is gonna look. That's gonna make a country very hawkish. Just think how hawkish the U.S. became in 2001 after the September 11th terrorist attacks. We became hawkish just off of one terror. Not, and I'm not going to belittle the terrorist attacks, but that was a look at that incident compared to what they faced for literally since 1947. You would be a little bit hawkish as well. This is why this the, Israel has one of the finest special forces outside of the United States. Within the IDF, their special forces is very good, according to um, some according to some soft operators here in America, American soft operators. They say uh, this Israeli special forces is one of the best in the world. They don't. I mean, America is still the best when it comes to special operations, but the folks who come close are people like Israel, um, Australian. The Australians are pretty good. I've heard Israelis, the British, uh, the Canadians. Um, Surprisingly, I've heard the Mongolian special. I didn't even know the Mongolians Mongolians had special forces. They are pretty good, but a lot of other special forces in most other countries aren't very good. Korean, I know people have heard of Korean special forces. They're not that good, apparently. I mean, they're better than us civilians, and even just and probably better than anyone in the conventional army. But compared to our special forces units, yeah. But yeah, Israeli have some top special forces. And I know people will say, and I know there's some cynical people out there, like one of my friends will say, well, they're just attacking a bunch of people with rocks and sticks. No, they aren't. These Some of these people are well armed, and again, this comes from a bunch of people talking shit about who hate is, including some of my friends who hate Israel and don't know shit about history there, other than what they hear on what they gather from other leftists on Facebook and other anti-Semitic people on Facebook that they follow and take information from. Most of these people don't know shit about Middle Eastern history, nor their nor current events there. The people that the IDF fight are well armed because many of them of the enemies of Israel and America over there are financed by people like the Iranians. The Iranian government funds a lot of terror within the Middle East, and I want people to realize that most of the terrorism in the Middle East affects other Muslims. They terrorize their own more than they terrorize Israelis and Americans. They use terror to keep themselves in check because you know that the Muslim world is not unified. You have two major divisions within Islam, and then within them, there are multiple factions. And a lot of these factions are radicalized and they fight amongst each other. They sometimes only come together cohesively just to fight against us Americans and Israelis. But when they are not otherwise fighting us, they are fighting amongst each other and terrorizing each other. And the Iranians back people like Hezbollah and the Houthis and and Hamas and other groups to fight against us and to fight against the Israelis. So it's not like the IDF are just bullying people with rocks and sticks. That is a that is a bullshit leftist narrative pushed here, which is often promoted by those very groups because they fund those sort of ideas amongst our higher education institutions here, where they fund this misinformation. Again, I know I'm going above my pay grade here, but yes, people should know this. Like a lot of these wrong-headed ideas that college students get are because they are in places with student organizations that are funded by radical Islamic groups back overseas and given this propaganda, which they take as facts because they genuinely don't know any better. Not because they are, not because these American students here are dead set upon, the bringing down America, but they're being genuinely misled into thinking that, everything bad there is because of us. And things are way more complicated than that. We've caused a lot of problems there. But again, a lot of these terrorist organizations fight amongst each other over there and bully other Muslims into taking on their causes. And a lot of these people, the Israelis and Americans fight over there are funded through people like the Iranian government, who fund people like Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis. So, anyway, Traces could be wrong, but hasn't that land been disputed for centuries? Like Christians used to claim that was holy land, whose places to declare it for Jewish people over there. So again, I'm not going to fault you, but yes, this is why people don't know Middle Eastern history too well. So people think the Crusades were just there's multiple Crusades. People don't know that the most people think the Crusades were just Christians running to Israel saying we're going to defend this for in the name of Christendom. The first Crusades were started because of the the sheer bloodbath that was going on at the time because of Muslim conquest. You gotta realize at that time the Muslims did not control all of North Africa and the Middle East. They gained it through in conquest and invasion. So people always like to talk about the European conquest of different regions of the world, leaving yes. So the Europeans did a lot of conquest of the world, usually around its around the borders of these countries. Like they went to places like North America and Europe and Asia and conquered. Whereas the Muslims conquered just as much as well, but they conquered from the interior of Eurasia. They conquered parts of Europe. They conquered parts of South Asia, East Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. I mean, how think about it. How is the largest Muslim country in the world in Southeast Asia? Indonesia. Followed next to like right next to it, Malaysia. Indonesia, Asian people, is the largest Muslim country in the world per capita. You would think the largest Muslim country in the world would be in the Middle East, but it's not. It's all the way in Southeast Asia. So the first Crusades was literally start was literally started because of the bloodbath of Muslim conquest across North Africa and the Middle East. And at the time, the Muslims were more powerful than the Europeans. The Christians were. It was the it was the Europe it was the Europeans that were at the disadvantage. They were they were the Europeans during the first Crusades were actually the underdog, not the Muslims. The Christians were the underdog. And again, they came in because of the sheer bloodbath going across the Middle East and North Africa. They didn't want Israel to fall under complete Muslim rule, which it did at it for a time throughout the history of the Crusades. Um, I mean, they had already lost the most important part of Christendom prior to the Crusades, which was Constantinople. You gotta understand the earliest Christians were people in North Africa and the Middle East. This is why the center of Christendom wasn't was no longer in Europe. It was in the Near East in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, Turkey. After the fall of Rome, the Roman Empire went on up until the Middle Ages through the Eastern Roman Empire, which is the Byzantine Empire. This was still the Roman Empire. After the Western Empire fell, the Eastern Empire lived on, the Byzantine Empire, and Constantinople was the center of Christendom. They lost that. They didn't want to lose all of all of Jerusalem as well. So it's propaganda now to see as Europe was the bad guys here. They were the underdog. The Europeans were literally the underdog. People can look this stuff up if they don't believe me. Um, has the land been disputed? Absolutely. I mean, the middle that part of the world has been exchanged for a long time, but so has many places. What name me a name me a geographical region where humans have thrived for centuries where the land hasn't been disputed. I'll wait. Here in North America, on the east coast of America, where I am, not here in Maryland, but say up north, you had a long-standing fight between, say, the the Iroquois and and the um the the other prominent native group. I forgot their names, but they've been fighting back and forth for the same land as well. The way um, the Jews and Palestinians were fighting over uh, Palestine. But here's the thing. So Israel was established before Palestine, like 1,300 years before Palestine, before it fell. It was the kingdom of Israel and Judah. And even after the Roman Empire, they were allowed to be like a vassal state within the Roman Empire before Palestine took over, right? Um, Palestine fell, I believe, to the Persian Empire. Like I said, that's why I said you really can't talk about Palestine in modern times because there's never been a modern state of Palestine like there's been a modern state of Israel. Palestine in it survived in name, but not as a separate nation state the way Israel did under the Persians, um, the Arabic caliphates, or whatever, the Ottomans, and some other folks before the British took over that region. And it was the British who with working with the UN established the state of Israel. Like I said, there was originally, I think, some plans to make a two-state thing there, with there being an Israel and Palestine. I don't know what happened with that. I don't remember because I don't remember my history that well enough, my world history that good. So, but yes, the land has been disputed for a long time. But there's historical facts here. Like I said, Israel had been a state, had been a kingdom 1,300 years before Palestine. And Palestine fell to conquest. And there hasn't been a modern state of Palestine. There's been the Palestinian people formed of many tribes of people within that region who lived in different places like Israel, Jordan, Egypt. I think I said Syria, right? Places like that. The the one of the unanswered questions is if they are if if all those countries support Palestine, why don't they allow those people to live in their countries? That is a question that needs to be answered. But in any case, that's I think that throws a little bit of information that people might not otherwise be aware of. Just do says Arabs and Middle Eastern folks aren't pushovers. They don't win a lot of major battles anymore, but they have beaten a few occupations in recent decades. Well, yeah, no one has ever claimed them to be pushovers. I mean, look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan is like a honey badger. You don't fuck with Afghanistan. Like every person who's come to Afghanistan has not held on to it. um, Before us, it was the Soviets. Before the Soviets, it was the British. Uh, Before the British, I guess it was like the Turks, the Ottomans, and so forth. Afghanistan has never um, suffered invaders for too long. Um, and we even backed them. We trained the Taliban back in the 80s. I mean, if people don't believe me, you can literally watch Rocky 3. Those were the Taliban that Rocky was fighting with to kick out the Soviets in Rocky 3. I mean, sorry, not Rocky, in Rambo 3. That was the Taliban. We armed and trained the Taliban. People don't know one of the one One of the things the Army Special Forces specifically does, and I'm talking about Army Special Forces, I'm referring to the unit that are the Green Berets, not the other Special Forces units, because there are many Special Forces units within the U.S. Army. But I'm referring to the specifically the Green Berets. One of the missions that Green Berets do as a Special Forces unit is they go and train armies around the world to fight uh, to fight counterterrorism and insurgencies and stuff like that. We like for instance, I go to the Philippines. I'm married to a Filipino. They had a People don't know in the Philippines there's a long-standing civil war in the south of the country in Mindanao because of insurgents. Some of these insurgents are now allied with Arab terrorist groups like ISIS and other groups. And ever since the 70s, um, there has been this insurgency. It started with the current president's father, Ferdinand Marcos Sr., who declared martial law and ruled over the ruled over the country as a dictator for 20 years and is in the Guinness World Book of Records for stealing the most money from a nation. He literally pilfered the nation and impoverished it by taking billions of dollars, billions with a capital B, and the Marcos family has become a powerful political family ever since. After that, in the early '80s, he the country had enough of his bullshit, and he fled the country and was exiled in America because he was buddies with Ronald Reagan. He flew him out to Hawaii to get him, and then later on, his wife Ismelda went back to the country and became a senator. Um, and all of their family are now involved in politics, and now their son Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Um, is now the current president of the Philippines. And people were asking, they was like, well, what happened to the billions of dollars? He's like, oh, we no longer have that money. He claims that most of the money was reclaimed by the government, and the rest of it they no longer have, which is just a complete fucking lie. I mean, when you're in the Guinness World Book of Records for stealing the most money from a nation, yeah, they they still have a lot of wealth. They did give back some of the money to the country, or some of it was taken from them. Like all the artwork that Ismelda had bought and stuff like that. Like she had huge collections of European art and clothing and jewelry. A lot of that was reclaimed by the nation, by the government. But ever since then, they have formed an insurgency in the south against the national government of the Philippines, and they've been waging a war against the national government there. There's actually already now a semi-autonomous region of the Philippines within Mindanao. This that is still part of the Philippines, but they are self-governed all the way to like the southern tip of the Philippines. Mindanao is still part of the country, but again, these rebels want Mindanao to be separate from the rest of the Philippines, either as a semi-autonomous region like that other part of the country, or as a fully sovereign country unto themselves. And one of our long-standing missions of Army Special Forces has been training the Philippine national government to fight against those insurgents down there, because that is one of their biggest mission sets. Is they go to different parts of the world, and they blend in with the locals, and they train their military. So we did that with the Afghanistan military force, and from what I've heard, those Afghanis are horrible. Like they make up like they from what I've heard, the Afghani military force is a joke. that seems pretty obvious when you saw how quickly they dissolved back in 2021. They didn't even put up a fight against the Taliban. They suck. But yeah, one of the mission sets of Army Special Forces is to train those folks, and we train. And in doing so, one of the things we did back in the 80s, we trained the Taliban. We also trained the Iraqi folks. Saddam Hussein used to be one of our boys. That used to be one of the homeboys, because we used Iraq as a stalwart against Iran. So guess what? We propped up Hussein back in the day. Kel Surprise, right? People, I, I think before people start, uh, I think before people start taking sides politically in a lot of these geopolitical discussions, it pays to know a little about the history first. Um, Just Do says, just seems crazy to send the military back over there again. He says Crusaders were 100% a result of Islam expansion. Conquest was the norm for everyone back then. The Crusaders were just on a huge scale. Yeah, so like I think there were four major crusades. So there was some that the Europeans won and some that the Europeans lost. I was um, One of the things it did kick those Muslims out of those European countries, because like I said, the Muslim conquest had gotten so big they had conquered parts of Europe. Look at Italy and Spain and other places in southern Europe still have Muslim influence, even parts of southern France, right? Um, and a lot of places in Eastern Europe still have that influence. So yeah, the it's easy just to say, oh, white man bad, colored man good, but it's I'm sorry, that is a very simple-minded view. I mean, I'm not saying you just to do. I'm saying in general, the people who think like that out there, like there's a lot of people who think in simplified terms, white man bad, colored man good, without looking at all the facts surrounding it. Like I said, the people nowadays look at the Crusades as the Europeans like being bullies, not realizing they were actually the underdog during most of the Crusades. They won some crucial battles, and I think either the second or third crusade they won, but they didn't win all of them. It was like 50-50, which is still saying a lot because, again, they were the underdog. It was less of them, and the Muslims were better trained and better educated. So, and they had the hometown advantage. And if you are the leader of Christendom, the and I'm referring to the Pope here, kind of makes sense if the Pope says, uh, "Guys, we gotta protect the Holy Land." Like he's the freaking Pope. I mean, he literally traces his line of authority back to Saint Peter himself. It would kind of behoove him to say, "Guys, we can't let Jerusalem fall." And it's not, and like I said, it's not. We look at it now, when we look at it in its totality, we know that's not in isolation. We are looking at him talking about the whole conquest of North Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. And saying, guys, we can't let them have the Holy Land. That, like, come on. That's when the guys suited up. There's like, all right, another salvo to the Crusades was that it it unified Europe. Europe was um Europe was in a constant state of warfare, not between nations, but within nations. Like it was often the case that barons were fighting, like it was like the Game of Thrones basically. Like you often saw lords fighting against other lords for land and power within the kingdoms, and it was all but within the king's power to keep these barons from fighting each other. So one of the best things that could have happened in medieval Europe was the call to the Holy Crusades, which unified Europe against a common enemy, because they by that time, like they were immersed in so much internal internal turmoil that they probably would have sunken into a long state of just dark ages, which was the first era of the middle of of medieval Europe, the Dark Ages. It would have stayed that way if they kept fighting amongst each other for the little bits and pieces that they had. So, um, just due says European heavy horse did not do so well in the desert. Um, yeah, but I mean, European uh European warriors adapted and used like Arabic, could get Arabic stallions and stuff like that. Um, you gotta realize like the mounted European knight was like the modern day equivalent of a tank. Just the armor alone probably weighed about 100 pounds, and usually to be a man that could survive wearing such heavy armor, like you had the, depending on what era of the Middle Ages, you had like both the chain mail, and then you had the then um after the chainmail, they had their tunic and robes, over which there was more metal armor, then put on a a, a large horse who himself was partly armored as well. These were formidable. These were formidable warriors. They Medieval knights were the ancient were the modern day cavalry. These the knights formed Most of the time the knights formed the cavalry around, to which supported the foot soldiers. Most of the people, because look, I, horses are expensive. Most of the people fighting were not on horses. Most of them were foot soldiers. A lot of people saw this as a call to arms for to for like peasants, or maybe impoverished merchants and stuff like that. They saw um, they saw warfare as a way of climbing up in society, and they would go in as enlisted foot soldiers. But yeah, the bulk of the fight wasn't on horseback. That was only the noblemen that could afford to be on horseback, and those most of those noblemen, were knights. Well, I should say, yeah, like all knights were noblemen, except for like a few who may have become what you call landed knights, people who were propped up to be knighted even if they weren't lords. But usually if they were knighted, that's because they were also offered a lordship along with it. They became a landed knight, in other words. But that was very rare. Most people who were knights were already established lords. So this most of those people formed what would have been the cavalry and the leaders of these European armies. The bulk of the fighting would have been done by the foot soldiers. The same with these uh, Arabic armies and Turkish armies. They would have been mostly on foot as well, except for, like I said, some people who would have been horseback, which would have been the privileged people, the leaders and the lords. Um, Maybe a few might have been even in the chariots of some sort, but most of the fighting was done on foot. Um, Just a dude says European cavalry served a different purpose and couldn't really compete with faster, lighter armor horses. Well, what I'm saying is the knights were the cavalry. Like if you look at modern day armies, when you look at the the logos for the cavalry in the U.S. Army, they are people. They are they are horses. Or if you play chess, what is this? What is the piece? This the horse, right? So, our yes, cavalry has been on like we trace we trace the modern day army cavalry back to the Middle Ages because those were to form the cavalry would have been those people on foot. I mean, sorry, on horseback. So anyway, man, you have a good night. I have an early morning tomorrow. Yeah, it's late here too. I didn't realize I went so late. So uh that's it for me. If anyone else got any random questions, you guys can leave it in the comment section. I didn't mean this to become a history lesson, but when I do a ask me anything format, there's no telling it's where it's going to go, how where the conversation is going to go. So this was cool. It let me be a little history nerd for a second. Because like I said, often political misgivings come from a lack of awareness of current events, and usually that's intentional because a lot of political leaders want us to be ignorant of certain current affairs in order for us to accept their ideas. So there you go. Um, but yeah, guys, if you haven't, please give me a like, share, and subscribe. Um, I know a lot of people will be probably watching this more on replay because there's not very many people in the chat room right now. But if you are watching this on replay, um, please feel free to give me a super thanks. You can you can choose whatever amount that you want to donate. And if you don't want to do that, you can also go to my Cash App, which will be linked in the description and is also pinned in the chat room as well. $ Just a Contrarian, all one word. Um, and another link in the description is buy me a coffee. That keeps me up so I can make these very um, pedantic conversations and have these late night bull sessions with you guys. So I appreciate anything you can donate, whether it's to my super thanks, Cash App, or buy me a coffee. Um, Otherwise, if you can't donate anything, I'll take a subscribe and a like. Thank you to everyone. Have a good one.